Now, we're joined by a young entrepreneur who, although he's only in his mid-30s, he's already set up a number of different businesses. Patrick Walsh is best known for his work in Dogpatch Labs. Once confused by a passerby down in the Dublin Docklands as a doggy daycare centre, it's something completely different. It's a shared space for startup tech companies. But with the pandemic forcing people away from offices, Patrick has had to reinvent the business, and we can get to that shortly. But Patrick, first of all, you're very welcome to the programme. You're an entrepreneur, you've set up Dogpatch Labs, you're helping other entrepreneurs, so you're all entrepreneur. Was that something that was in the family?
Well, I grew up hearing stories about Uncle Joe, known as Josie Keating in Carsavine in Kerry. And he's 90 years old now, but he's had all these entrepreneurial adventures throughout his life. And I was fascinated by them. And one of his first ones was in relation to the transatlantic cable, which kind of runs from Valentia Island there. And it was the first time Europe and America was connected in the age of telecommunications. But there came a time when the first cable was no longer needed. And Joe figured a way of pulling that cable out in a way that wasn't too costly.
From the bottom of the ocean?
From the bottom of the ocean. And he hired this boat, he hired this crew, and they sort of pulled it in mile by mile right out into the Atlantic Ocean.
How much of it did he get?
Well, he didn't get the whole thing. He could only go out, 10 miles or so. But he pulled up enough to, this is valuable cable, right? There's copper in it. And so what he decided to do was sell the cable to a Spanish telecommunications company, and that's how he made his first few quid. So
basically, you hearing stories about him was something that sort of opened up the world of business. And
I just thought these were great stories, and actually there's a piece of that transatlantic cable that sits on Valentia Slate in Dogpatch today. And when the King and Queen of the Netherlands came through, they wanted to meet Uncle Joe as well, and so he did. You know, I wasn't sure if he was going to be able to make it. He's 90 years old just last week, and but as soon as I called him,
he met the royals, the Dutch royals.
Yeah, well, listen, he got new shoes, a new shoot, and he was ready to go.
Was he well used to royals? It was the first time he'd met royalty.
There was another story of him being out in the Middle East doing business, and him being at a function and sitting down in the wrong chair. I think it was the Princess or the Sultan's chair, and everyone was kind of in a bit of shock. And, it was pointed out to him. And, of course, Joe has a way with words. And by the end of the night, he was getting on famously with the Prince. And I think he ended up even doing an Irish jig by the end of it. So there's so many stories like that.
He sounds like a colourful guy.
Yeah.
And Harry and Meghan visited Dogpatch Labs. Something like that, is that it's a great piece of publicity, but is it a massive hassle organisationally?
Well, they had just been married 6 weeks previously. This was their first international visit. They wanted to come to Ireland. So listen, you can imagine the security, the background. Everyone in Dogpatch was background checked. Every minute was choreographed, etc. But look, they wanted to come to Ireland to experience a little bit about history and culture, but also about the future and innovation. And so they came to CHQ building, where at one end you've got Epic, the Emigration Museum, which tells the story of all these Irish people that went around the world. And so they went there first, and then they came up to us, to Dogpatch, to meet entrepreneurs and young coders. And
did your Uncle Joe make it?
No, Uncle Joe didn't make the cut on that one, unfortunately.
He didn't pass the embassy test, was it?
And I have to explain myself every time I go down to Carsavine why that is the case.
Now, when it comes to, you mentioned there about CHQ building and Dogpatch Labs. How did it come about that you located it in CHQ?
Yeah,
which is a fabulous building down there.
Yeah, it's a beautiful building. It's this 200-year-old iconic Irish building. It's actually the #1 industrial protected building in Ireland. And if you ever walk in there, there's this beautiful iron cast roof, which actually became the model for many of the train stations, like Euston Station in London. So it was a very innovative building for its time, and these incredible vaults, these 200-year-old vaults below. So I had qualified as an accountant, and I tried a startup, and I realized about a year in that it wasn't going to work. And I wasn't quite sure what to do. But one of the things that experience had done is it had immersed me in the startup scene, in the startup ecosystem. And I realized there was this real need for a hub. I sort of sometimes described it as a bus station for entrepreneurs. You'd see these places in San Francisco. And I was walking through the building one day, And of course, the building was empty at the time, but then in 2015 or so. And I thought, wow, this could be a really great place for a startup hub. That was kind of the initial eureka moment, if you like.
So how do you then turn that into a reality and make contact with the owner? The building was bought by Neville Isdell, the former chief executive of Coca-Cola, originally from County Down.
Originally from County Down, yeah. He's he's originally from Downpatrick, emigrated and became the global CEO of Coca-Cola. An amazing story unto itself.
So did you know him or anything like that?
No, I didn't know him at all. I didn't know who owned the building. So at that moment, I ran home and started Googling who owns the CHQ building. And of course, the first thing you see is this Wikipedia page of Neville Isdell leaning over the table at Davos. And I realized this was the guy I needed to speak to. And I didn't know how to get in touch with him. I didn't know anyone who knew him.
You didn't know how to get to Davos.
No, I didn't. I didn't have an invite to Davos that year. So what I did was I created a little PowerPoint presentation, and I went down to the local Snap printers and got it bound. And I walked in the front door, and I think I handed it to the person who was operating the building, or the security guard even. And I said, "Could you give that to the guy who owns the building?"
And that was it.
And that was it.
What happened then?
Well, a few days later, I received an email. He had bought the building with his brother Mervyn, and I was invited to come to the Marca Hotel at 7 o'clock in the morning for a breakfast meeting.
5-star hotel.
5-star hotel.
Dublin City Centre.
One of many meetings throughout the day. And of course, I got up at 4 a.m. I think I had 5 cups of coffee. I was jacked on coffee. I mean, I'd be surprised if I was making any sense at this stage. And I sat down with the two of them, and Neville said, "Look, I've only got 3 questions for you in relation to your proposal." He said, the first one is, he said, "Have you ever done this before?" And I said, "No." And he said, "Okay." And he said, the second one is, "Has your price point ever been proven in the Irish market before for this new type of business?" And I said, "No." And he goes, "That's okay. Really the only question that matters is the last question." He goes, "Have you got the money to do it?" And I said, "No."
You said, I haven't got the money for the breakfast.
No, yeah, I'm hoping you're paying for this breakfast and the marker. But I said, "I tell you why, I still think it's a really great idea." And in fairness to, especially I must say, his brother Mervyn as well, who I think they wanted me to succeed, and
so they went for it,
and they gave me a shot. Yeah.
And you mentioned earlier, in terms of setting up your own businesses, you had come up with business ideas from a very early age, and you'd set up a few businesses that didn't work out.
Yeah, I did a couple of things in college, like a sort of a drinks keg thing and a recycling thing, and then I suppose I tried this
drinks keg. That sounds interesting.
Well, this is the time at the Celtic Tiger, where everyone was having these big 21st birthday parties, and I arrived at one once, and someone had a whole bar and kegs and everything. And I said, "Wow, this is fantastic." And they said, "Oh, it was an absolute nightmare to get it." And I said, "Why didn't you go online?" And they said, "There is nothing online." And I remember actually leaving the party and building a website that weekend with a friend of mine.
You must have left fairly sober.
I left fairly sober, and then we spent a number of years just doing that business and going just during college. So there was all these kind of small, little sort of entrepreneurial adventures, successes and failures that led me to that moment. And when that big moment came for Dogpatch, I put all of that into that one opportunity.
And when you then got into CHQ, the Isdell brothers had said, "Yes, you're there." Was it a big task to develop the space, the location? What was it like?
Yeah, so they gave me the shot. They gave me the keys to this empty furniture store, basically. I think it was a Meadows and Byrne previously. And, I sat down, I remember, at this rickety old table, and I was really excited. And about 5 minutes later, I was thinking to myself, I have no idea what I'm doing, But we started piece by piece. I kind of met these young architects and this young sort of aspiring property business guy, Hugo and Harry, and all these different people. And there was this whole team, this kind of motley crew that was assembled. And we just started piece by piece, buying IKEA desks and going from there.
And how many client companies or members or tenants, or how would you describe them essentially? They're members.
They're
are
members.
They,
They're
how many
members
members would you have then now?
Well, we started with just 10, and it was one floor, and then we went down to the vaults with a sponsorship with Ulster Bank and Google, and then up to the mezzanine floor when all these other corporates came in. So just before pandemic, there was 125 startups, 500 members would have called that home. So it's become this kind of big, vibrant community.
The kinds of companies that are in there, Patrick, are, what sort of things
So
do they
they're
do?
mostly Irish startups that are globally focused, right? That are sort of technology companies. But also you get international companies from Silicon Valley, etc., setting up European operations for the first time. So that's great to mix them all up. About 10% of our desks we give away for free to social enterprises, like Coder Dojo, for example, who teach kids how to code. And lastly, then corporates want to be close to startups too. Like ESB, for example, is based there, and they create internal startups. So all of that sort of creates our community mix.
So are there any particular ones that are doing unusual things or interesting things?
Well, there's all kinds. There's the full gamut. I mean, if you go up the stairs right now, one of our biggest companies is facial recognition for cows, right? They use cameras in barns and artificial intelligence to detect how cows are behaving if Daisy is sick, or, so that's one of the wilder ones. And it's doing really well, by the way.
They would have raised money and things are going well.
Yeah, they've raised millions of euros. They've attracted investment from the largest agricultural company in the world. It's two brothers from Kildare who have started that. And so that's just an example.
Then building on the success of what you have done, you bid probably during the pandemic period for the NDRC contract, which is the state accelerator program.
Yeah.
How did that come about? Did you have to do it during the pandemic?
We had to do it during the pandemic. It started just before with a smaller team. NDRC is kind of Ireland's national accelerator. It's for globally our most ambitious entrepreneurs. And it came up for tender. And I had a smaller team on it. And then, of course, the pandemic hit and we had to shut down the whole facility. And then I put the whole team on it, all 20 of us or so.
So with the pandemic, you had to do it really because the whole business model would have changed, I presume, because there's nobody going into the centre anymore. So
we went from this very busy hub, 10,000 people came to our hub in 2019. And basically, virtually zero have been there in the last 12 months. So
was this a make or break for you then for Dogpatch?
It was a kind of a make or break, in terms of, we needed something to keep us going. But also I think we were building on a lot of work that we had done, right? We had sort of this big community focus. We'd assembled this knowledge around entrepreneurship. When you're kind of standing at the crossroads and all these people coming in, you get a real sense of what the country needs, what entrepreneurship needs.
But at the same time, did you feel like a bit of an outsider coming to it? Did you rate your chances of getting it?
Let's just say that I think there was kind of 3 companies in the short list, and I think the one could argue that we were the underdog. You had this big, huge company going for it. I think they were the most active investor in the US last year at one point.
So were you able to celebrate then on the day? How did you find out that you'd got it?
Well, it was kind of something like getting your leaving cert results. It comes in an email and you sort of stare at it before you click and you realize your life's going to change one way or another. And it was just before Christmas, so about half the team was online and half the team was physically present. And listen, it was a great moment. We had put our heart and soul on the line. It was an 800-page tender. We had all worked together on it, and it was, I don't know, it was kind of like winning the FA Cup final, people jumping around the room.
You had done it, of course, with in collaboration with other cities. It wasn't just going to be a Dublin thing, which kind of feeds into this idea that people are talking about now about the future of the office and the potential for not just other cities, but for small towns and rural Ireland. How do you see all of that playing out vis-a-vis the future of the office?
Yeah, I think the big distinction we made was that it wasn't just us as a Dublin hub going for it. It was actually us in partnership with hubs right across the country, from Cork to Kerry to Galway, coming together so that the National Accelerator will actually exist in all of these different hubs. Because you've all these great hubs popping up across the country.
But is what you're doing the future of the office? Do you think we'll ever go back to the traditional office?
Well, I I don't think we're ever going back to the way it was, for sure. And I think some people talk about the third, the third that are going to want to come back to the office, the third that are going to want to remain remote, and the third that are going to want to remain hybrid. And I also think that as people move through their lives, right, if they're young and they're just out of college, they probably want to be on site. But if they have a young family, isn't it great that you can be at home? So I think it'll actually change as people move through their own lives. I think it's a huge opportunity for rural Ireland. I think we're already starting to see how that is the case, and how many of the started participating in the programs are based in a rural hub, but plugged in a hybrid way to us up in Dublin.
But I suppose you might also miss out on some of the social stuff that goes on around the office as well. There's two sides to every story.
There's two sides to every story, and I think certainly, as I said, when you're in that early parts in your career and you're trying to figure everything out, I think you probably will have a sense of, I need to be on site to figure this thing out. And then when you get a bit more used to it, maybe you'll pull away. But there is, I don't think we quite know, because it's only the first week since we've been back, really, isn't it?
Nobody knows. Patrick Walsh of Dogpatch Labs, thank you very much for joining us on the programme.